Okay, pasture management. Still critical in dry times to get the most out of pasture and to minimise your degradation of soil and topsoils, okay? And we do see this tendency in drought for people to graze too hard, okay, to overgraze, to not leave good ground cover. And we're talking about moisture retention. Part of it's about what we leave behind after we graze and we cut. Really, really important to be focused on that. I think things like Scott's talked about, if it's available, we see some tremendous responses to pre-mowing. Okay, I think it does wonderful things for the plant as well because you're controlling the residual to where you want it. Okay, it encourages tillering. Certainly, we look at how that sprint was sort of tillering at the base after pre-mowing or cutting. It means that the cows reduce selection. All right, and that's a big issue. And Scott alluded to it with the lucerne and the stripping out of the top of the lucerne. And stripping out of the top of the lucerne means that all they're eating is the low fibre part of the diet. And you're just left with this cruddy stem. What we find is that the pre-mowing removes that, so you get a more balanced diet, and it works with ryegrass as well. Okay, and we actually get a better test with it because they eat the whole plant, not just the really low fibre part of the plant. BMR, absolutely. That's right. They do. They eat the whole thing. And the other thing I've observed, and Scott might share his thoughts on it, is that because the feed's cut and it's there ready when they come out in the morning, they just hoover it up. And their intake in that first 2 hours while it's still cool enough for them to keep eating is heaps better. Yeah. All right,
they fill themselves up straight away.
Absolutely. So now I don't think you need to do it on every rotation, but if there's ever a rotation where you're thinking I'm going to mulch after or slash afterwards, okay, that's where your pre-mowing can step in. All right, you do it because you're going to do the paddock work anyway. All right, so instead of post-mowing, we do pre-mowing. Cows will take a bit of training. One of the things you think, and I'm sure Scott's been caught on this, you cut all this feed down and you walk compared to what you used to allocate for grazing, and there's all this feed left in the paddock, you say, oh, they're not eating it. But then you look at the cows and they're fat as ticks, but there's all this feed left because you've freed up all this additional feed that otherwise would have been left in the paddock as residue. Yeah. So look, it's really, really useful and something to think about, and it will let you get more out of your pastures a lot of the time. This critical focus on water use efficiency, you know, we talked about, again, making choices with water. I mean, I nearly cry when I drive into the Hunter Valley at times when I see, you know, the big thick sprinkler going and there's a lucerne plant here and a lucerne plant over there and, you know, no fertiliser on the paddock and nothing in between. There's not many of the dairies do it, but there's a few. But, you know, being really focused that water is gold. And if you, yeah. And you see it, Josh, all the time as you're driving up into the valley. You see it everywhere. Okay, if we should, you know, be able to get somewhere on most irrigated forages between 2 and 4 tonnes of dry matter per megalitre of water applied in that zone. The 4's at the top end, you know, that's for your best maize crops and your high-end forage sorghums. Okay, lucerne can be really marginal. Okay, and particularly thin lucerne, and it can drop down below a tonne. Okay, but high density lucerne can be, you know, around 2 tonnes of dry matter per milliliter if it's done well. And the things you think, if you've got a lucerne stand that's thinning, one of the really good options could be just to rip some millet into it or some other forage into it over the summer to make sure that that water that's going on is being used more efficiently. And again, there's experience in the room that's done that before. Instead of, you know, you're getting a good bang for your buck, it also makes it worthwhile going out and fertilising it. Look, we normally are reasonably aggressive with fertiliser. Okay, and again, if you've got the water, I think that's my phone, is it? I'm not meant to be getting it. Someone else's alarm, was it?
It's my alarm.
It's the same as mine. If you've got the water, you know, this stuff makes it work twice as well. Okay, so just being reasonably aggressive with your fertiliser if you've got the water. Okay, there's no point fertilising dry bare ground. Okay, it's not going to get you anywhere. But if you've got an actively growing plant, using nitrogen at the upper end of response rates is generally well rewarded. Okay.
50, 100 kilos?
But for what? What are you watering? Forest, minimum of 100 kilos per hectare, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, if you're actually growing it to cut, you could go significantly higher than that, okay, depending on what your target is for yield. All right.
Because I'm just thinking nitrate.
Yep. It's not going to be a huge issue for you, but I can't guarantee that without testing and being part of your business, mate. But, you know, if we're taking it, if you're looking to take cuts at a 7 or 8 tonne, bigger cuts, you'd want to be up 150 to 200. Okay, but if you're doing it as a grazing space, that sort of, and forage sorghums, you don't want to be getting much higher than that for grazing. That 80 to 100 is going to work pretty well most of the time, depending on your underlying levels of urea. Yeah, and I know the hunter's a bit different because your soils tend to be a bit higher in potassium, but don't forget potassium in summer. All right, a bit different where you are, Matty, because you're not on the black stuff here. All right, but the potassium becomes really important in summer as well. And we shouldn't forget potassium export when we're selling feed and what that costs too. Okay, so your planting strategy is really, really important. Optimising the summer sowing, if you haven't, you'd want to be doing it pretty soon. We'd set a bit of a gate, and if you're in a situation where you don't have water, I wouldn't be putting anything in. But once we get out beyond Christmas, it becomes pretty marginal as to whether you'd bother, and you'd probably hold your powder for your autumn plantings, okay? If we haven't had a break in your dryland country before then, Matt, or the river. Get it ready. It's not doing anything.
Doesn't matter if it sits too much.
Absolutely, absolutely.
The thing about where we live is that 200 mils of rain can come.
Yeah.
And then whilst it's not normal this time of year, it happens.
Absolutely, Josh.
So
Yeah.
being prepared is not essential.
And we'll sow corn up until halfway through January, not on grazing ground, but on off-farm area if we need to. And I think this is where I guess where you guys are really important is these short season corns are going to give people a lot more flexibility if we see more of them come available over time. Because the short season corns give us that later planting option. They also give us a very early planting option if people need feed fast. So, there's always been this focus on just yield per hectare is the most important thing. But I think time in the ground is becoming a more important thing as well that we need to think about. How quick it is till we get to utilise the product becomes important. Okay? And water utilisation. Or how much water have you got? If you've only got 5 megs and you don't have 7, a short season crop can make sense. So a bit of flexibility in that thinking rather than just saying we've got to chase 27 tonne. I'm quite happy with 17 if I've been able to do that 20 days quicker on less water, okay? Because it's better than nothing. And if I don't have the extra water, that's not a choice. So.
You've been saying that stuff was sown 4th of January last year.
Yep.
We've got 24 tonne on the second crop.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
26 tonne on the first crop.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Yep. No, that's right. And look, we did that Chesworth crop, which was triple cropped for the year. Okay. They did 12 tonne of barley in one cut. Off the back of the 2 maize crops.
Yeah, so here we done 24, 26 and 12.
Yep. So the big yields per hectare are certainly there and available if you get the agronomy and the timing right, and it's all about timing those things. Okay. So if you've got irrigation and using it wisely, irrigation strategy is really, really, really important. I think Scott's already touched on this. Watering deeper on these black soils in particular, I think is absolutely critical. Hunter Valley went through years of just running pivots around, putting on 6 to 9 mil just to get around it every day, and it watered down about that far, okay? And all it did was basically provide a little bit of evaporation off the surface every day. So the longer, deeper watering becomes really, really important. And I guess thinking about things like shielding the track from water, some people set up half sprinklers either side of the track, so it doesn't actually water over the pivot, as well as your surfacing. If you've got soggier country, they're all options that we can look at, to get that water deeper into the profile. And Scott captured it beautifully. It's all about the proportion loss to evaporation of what you put on. And I guess this is where the pipes, horrible things that they are, the pipes have been great for lucerne in particular because it's allowed people to put on a couple of inches and water deep into that profile, and that lucerne can then draw off that for a couple of weeks. Yeah. What are you watering? And again, I'll show you some interesting photos of this. Watering perennial ryegrass through summer is not going to be an ethical position for any animal production industry as we move forward. And I think we've just got to get away from it. I think your boundary on watering ryegrass, your high quality Italians, maybe first week of December if you've got the right stuff in there. Okay, and depends on your year and your value of water. So moving across to C4s over summer is really, really important, your forages. The chicory and lucerne, I still think we need to just do some more evaluation on their water use efficiency. They're wonderfully nutritious crops, okay, and if they can be done with supplementary water, I think they're they're going to be really, really good. I think we need to still look very carefully at what water they're using, but that lucent's got that other value. And quite often we think, well, that really bad part of water use efficiency, it's a bit like feeding those cows $600 hay, so you can make the most out of them a bit later when your feed conditions are less onerous. Yep.
And some guys use it as a resilient strategy too, so having the chicory loose in there,
Yep.
something they can back the water off if they don't have it, or
Yeah, that's right. See, that's what I put a fair bit in this year.
No, they're very resilient crops.
and they can sit there and say, right, I've got my maize and
Yep.
I've got water, I can back that off.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to lose it. It's still going to be growing.
And I think there's other issues there with the root zones too. I mean, we know that those roots are getting down well below a metre in the chicory and lucens, and that allows you, if you've had a wet winter or a wet spring, to actually take control of some of that subsoil moisture as well as what you just irrigated. Lucen will always go better after a good winter or spring through summer because of what's under the ground already. It's interesting, there's some really interesting, we've got some clients out on the Liverpool Plains that actually managed to grow a wheat crop this year. They went in and excavated one of the paddocks to see how deep the root went, 2.5 metres on wheat. Unbelievable. What pools these, if you've got the soil structures, the pool that these forages are getting down into. But the problem with ryegrass, we're not seeing it generally extend below the 30 to 40 centimetre horizon. So,
Which is important for nitrogen leaching.
look, absolutely.
It's going past that ryegrass root zone.
Yep. Yeah, if you're putting too much on and it's getting too deep through it, that is important, Tim. But
What about tall fescue? Is anyone using that recently? Like that
I think there's some really interesting stuff coming in the breeding in tall fescues that have softened the leaf dramatically, okay, and have made it a much more palatable product. We've seen a couple come through like Hummer, okay, which and the Quantum Max Ps, which are quite good. I know you guys are meant to have some stuff coming which is soft as well, which has we've been waiting for a few years.
2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I think they've got good potential, and because previously when we went on to fescues, the problem was that a lot of it was so ropey that cattle cut their mouths when they're eating it, and there's some really important stuff with fescue management. Is that you've got to know that the rotation is not a ryegrass rotation at the front end. It needs a good legume base to go with it, so a good prostate white clover base to go with it, and it doesn't make good silage or hay. So it's a grazing option because by the time you've got enough there to cut, you've lost a lot of quality in it. But look, it certainly has got excellent, much better summer responses to watering and water use efficiency than ryegrass, and really nutritious. So I think it's worth looking at. But you need to go in the hunter. The thing you'll need to be really careful of is to go through a couple of years of cropping first in summer. And by cropping, I mean cropping accompanied with pre-emergence to take out your summer grasses. All right, and your liver seed, because you're just going to get choked with rubbish summer grass if you don't manage that for a couple of years first. But I think there's some really interesting stuff. I don't know, Josh, if you've got anything to add to that.
A quick comment would be like what's happened in history is the management it's been treated like ryegrass or something.
Yep.
You've really got it when it's going in spring, like late spring, like now, it goes bananas. You've got to treat it more like a cockade plant. In terms of keeping it really
11-day rotations, 12-day rotations,
really keep on it.
and lots of
Keep
paddocks.
the quality
Yep.
and you'll be fantastic. Well, it's a 2020 DA thing where they got better milk production off fescues in Victoria than ryegrass. So,
I mean, the one I like up here, which we did at Split Rock, was the mix of fescue and prairie grass. And I think that'd be a cracker in the Hunter Valley, because we get the winter activity out of the prairie grass going into spring, and then we get the fescue activity out of the summer. The prairie sets seed, and that just repopulates. That's been just a terrific mix that I think is one that's really worthwhile exploring, particularly if you can get out of the heavy summer grass zone. Yeah.
prairie's pretty
Underrated.
we've got our demo site just here, and half the demo site's prairie grass now, just because it went to seed last year. It just takes over.
Yeah.